Hi guys, welcome to today's live session where we're going to go into cameras, animation, the movie render queue, and creating our animations and our renders basically. So let's begin. From our last class, there are a few things that I said we would work on today before we get into cameras. So let's just touch on that now. Most of it will have to do with optimizing your level or your scene. So let's do that now since we're getting towards, the end of this series. I think now would be a good time to look into optimization. Okay, so the first thing I want us to look at is how to optimize textures. Hey, Dukwechuks, thanks for joining. Just a quick one. Am I audible? Can you hear me well? Just a quick check. So, like I said, let's look at how to optimize textures. I covered that briefly in last week's class, but let's now look at it properly and see how it works. So I'm going to go to tools, I'm going to go to audits and then statistics. One second. This gives us an overview of a lot of what is happening in our level. So by default, it's set to primitive stats, which we'll get back to. But let's click on this and go to texture stats. Okay, good. All right, perfect. Thank you. So this gives you a list of all the textures you currently have in your entire level. One thing to check, ensure that at the top right corner, you are set to all streaming levels. So what that means is this will ensure it's looking at your persistent level and all the other levels that you might have in your scene. So again, ensure it's set to all streaming levels, not current. So that way you have an overview of everything you have in your level. Just going to refresh. Okay, good. So again, moving from left to right, the a list of all the textures, the actors that they are applied to, grab the type. Again, these are 2D textures. Now, these are the important ones we need to look at. Maximum dimension, current dimension. So if I click on any of them, it will cycle or it will flip from either the lowest to the highest and vice versa. Okay, and then format, what is important? Yes, and these other two are important, current memory and fully loaded memory. So essentially, here you can see which textures are the highest, and then you can work your way, all the way down. Currently, our fully loaded memory is almost 900 MB. Current memory is 428 MB. As you can see, I've already compressed some of the textures. That's why, you know, even though you can see the maximum here, current dimension based on what I've edited in my level. So that's why the current memory is this low. Now, typically for interactive projects like this, a 2K texture for the most cases is fine for what you need. So we're going to convert everything now to 2K, and then on the mesh or yeah, on a mesh by mesh basis, if you feel like okay, you need to have more resolution on the floor, on the walls, or elsewhere, then you can increase that texture for that material or surface. The good thing is this will not affect what will happen when we are rendering or exporting our animations or sequences. It will still use the maximum texture resolution. So this is just more for optimizing your game when you package it or run it to play. So let's do that. To do everything at once, we'll go to the content browser. I'm going to go to the texture folder. Let's filter by texture. Then I'm going to select everything. Okay, quickly. So let me delete the textures for the TV. This was a mistake from the previous class, so let me quickly do that. Okay, good. So again, you can just click on one and press Ctrl A to select all. right click. You want to go to, okay, you want to go to asset actions. Where are you? And then edit selection in property matrix. Now you might want to do this in batches. 93 is not that much for me, so I would say yes. Again, it shows you all the textures and some other properties, but what we want to do is compress everything. So expand compression, and you see maximum texture size. When it's set to 0, it means that it's using the maximum texture. But when I type 2048, what this is going to do is any texture that is higher than 2K will bring it down to 2K. Anyone that is lower than 2K will stay as is. So if you have 1K textures or 512, they won't come up to 2K. This is just going to bring down any texture that's higher than 2K down to 2K. So once I do that, I'll click. It took a few seconds. You see that we have asterisks at the sides of them. I'm going to save. Take a few seconds. Okay, close this, and let's go back to, did I close it? Okay, let's go back to Windows. No, Tools, Audit, Statistics. Now, as you can see, our fully loaded memory is 385 MB and current memory is 224 MB. So we really saved a lot of memory. If we had packaged this project without compressing, that would be an extra, almost double what this was before, and a lot more than this, almost double for both of them. So that really saves a lot of memory. And from what you can see, you can't really tell the difference, to be honest, unless like you really zoom in. Like a lot of the times, 2K textures do a pretty good job. I mean, this was formerly 8K and it still looks, quite good with a 2K texture. So that's one way to optimize. And depending on your system, you might actually feel the difference, how much faster and smoother it is. The next thing we want to do is enable, okay, let me reset the filters, is to enable nanite on our meshes. In the very first session, when we imported the meshes, we disabled nanite, and that was for a specific reason. And you'll see so in a minute. But to enable nanite is very simple. Select one mesh, Control B to go to where it is. I'm going to select all the static meshes, right click, nanite, just click on enable nanite for all of them. So once that's done, save, just so that you see what has transpired. I'm going to change this from lit to nanite visualization enabled. Okay, before, we used maxed in the previous class. Okay, yeah, so we've just done for the data smith assets. All right, that's good. So any mesh that is green has nanite enabled, and the ones that are red have not yet been enabled. So let's do that as well. I selected one, press Ctrl B to take me to where the meshes are. Select all, right click, nanite, enable. So I've done for the structure, for the furniture, and finally for the props. Select all, right click, nanite, enabled. Okay, let me just double check what I've done for the door. Okay, yeah, okay, I was doing some tests earlier. They are already enabled, so I'm going to save all. All right, good. So that's basically it. That is how to optimize, your model. So what is going on actually is, let's go back to nanite and go to triangles. You will see that every mesh is made up of triangles, right? And as we get closer, those triangles are smaller, giving us more details of that surface. But the further we go away, the nanite gives that particular mesh less details because it's further away from the screen, or from, we are not as close to it as possible, so it doesn't need that much information. So automatically nanite is doing all the background work, adjusting the number of polygons each mesh has depending on how close or far away you are from it. So in a nutshell, that's basically what nanite does. That's why you can bring in a model or static mesh with very large poly counts, and nanite does a good job of showing you only what you need to see, regardless of how large the poly count of the mesh is. Cool. Where nanite falls apart is with any static mesh that has a glass material. For now anyway, it doesn't work well with glass, and you see what I mean. If you look at this mesh, you can see that this looks weird. This knob looks weird. This looks weird. Let's go to the glass door. You see that the handles no longer look good. Can't really tell so much from the cutting wall because it's all square. But even here you can see, I'm guessing it's not a reflection issue. There's some normal issue going on with the glass. So typically, so that was the main reason why I did not import the meshes with Lumen enabled at the beginning. I wanted you to see how this would look, afterwards. So there's another way to optimize your models, which we'll go into now. So every mesh that has glass attached to it, I would select all of them and disable Lumen, nanite rather. So let me do that quickly. I think it's just these ones. Right click, nanite, disable. And as you see, we are back to good looking model. So before nanite came into Unreal Engine, the way we would optimize our models is by using what we call level of detail, LODs. Every model right now has an LOD of 0, so that's obviously the maximum poly count. But we want to add like maybe 4 levels of LOD. So when you are close to it, it's LOD 0. When you are further away, LOD 1, further away, LOD 2. And with each LOD, the poly count reduces. So to do that, let's open this in the static mesh editor, Control and E. Scroll down. Also, you can also enable nanite in the mesh editor. Let's scroll down to LOD settings. We have LOD group. Right now it's set to none. And see that at the top corner here it says LOD 0, and currently the number of polygons or number of triangles is 182,000 approximately. So what we want to do is change this from none to large prop. These are all different settings, and don't get hung up on the names. Essentially what they just do is some of them have more number of LODs, for example, depending on the kind of the size of the object you are applying the LOD to. For most cases, I am comfortable with just using large prop. It gives me 4 LODs. So I'm going to do that, save. Now what you see immediately is from this distance that we were before, we are now at LOD 3. Triangles is down to 22,000. So even from this distance, it has cut down the size by 5 times, maybe more, and it doesn't look like the shape has changed that much. If I go all the way back, yeah, so LOD is the lowest, so that's there's 0, 1, 2, 3, so that's 4 LODs. As I go closer, it changes from 3 to 2 to 1 to 0. So you have to be this close to see the maximum for the mesh to have its maximum poly count. Even at this distance, that's shifted down to half the poly count, so that saves a lot of memory. Move back a bit, it's on 2, move back, it's on 3. So that's basically the way it works. To see it in the viewport, we go to lit, go to level of detail, coloration, and enable mesh LOD coloration. So this is the way it works. At 0, the mesh is white. At LOD 1, the mesh is red. LOD 2 is green. LOD 3 is blue. So like I said, the other presets, some have up to 4, some have up to 5. Hello, Archery AAD1 I3D. Thanks for joining. So that's how LOD works. Now for the rest, we can do this for multiple meshes as well. So you don't have to do it one by one. Select all of these, press Ctrl B to go to the content browser. Let's right click, asset actions, and we want to edit selection in property matrix. Then we go to LOD settings, and this is where you type in the name of the LOD. It's large prop. I want to be sure that there's no space between the large and prop. So let me just open this, scroll back down. So capital L and capital P and it's together. So just type large prop. Click out. It will take a while, a few seconds. Okay. Once you're done, save. And yeah, so you can see it's adjusting as well. So you can use either one for your projects. Nanite is just much faster. Enable if you want to go around, if you have any mesh that has a glass attached to it, then this is the way to go. I'd say I think maybe it's your network online. So maybe it's your network, I'm not too sure. So save all. Let's go back to lit mode. So that is how to optimize your meshes, static meshes, and your textures. All right, good. A few things I want us to do before we continue. That's with the cameras. Let's add tree and grass so that when we start taking animations and renders, the scene will be complete. But before that, we need to enable some plugins and adjust some project settings. So let's do that now. Let's start with the plugins. For the trees we are going to use are made by Epic Games. They are free. They're called mega plants. But for them to work properly in Unreal Engine, we need to enable procedural vegetation. So procedural vegetation editor, this needs to be enabled. Once you do so, you need to restart the engine. But hold on before you do that. Another thing that we'll need, another plugin that we'll need for our animation is depth of field. So enable accumulation depth of field. And lastly, in the project settings, that is edit project settings, we want to enable nanite. So just type nanite and enable nanite foliage. So once you enable all three, you can restart your engine and everything will be good to go. Yes, this brings me back to something I forgot to cover in the last class. When we added the environment, I don't think I noticed it because we were in the night scene, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, it has blocked the direct light from the sky. So the simple fix is have it selected and search for shadow, disable cast shadow. So we have the directional lights coming through. Perfect. And again, this brings us to the second issue that you might potentially have with nanite. So the first one is, again, doesn't work well with glass. The second one is sometimes if you look at the static mesh for the sofa, you see that it has this weird, I will call it self shadowing on it. I think it also happens. Okay, I think the armchair is fine, but it's mostly on this sofa. So let's us see what is going on and how to fix it. So I'm going to open this in the static mesh editor. Okay, now this mesh, as you can see, has almost 800,000 polygons, or triangles rather. We have what we call the fallback triangles, and we have what we call the ray tracing fallback triangle, which is just 100157. Now, because if you're using hardware ray tracing, if you remember in the first lesson, we set up you either set up your project with real ray tracing, or what was the other one? Or it wasn't enabled essentially. So if you have ray tracing enabled, hardware ray tracing enabled, this solution is for that. I'll get to the other one. So what Lumen is doing is it is using, or well, Lumen and Nanite anyway, because Lumen is the lighting solution. It is using the ray tracing fallback triangles. So even though this is almost 1,000,000 polygons, it is using the fallback, which is just over 1,000. That's what enables us to have this real-time calculation. But sometimes, depending on how dense the mesh is, it might lead to these kind of issues. So now you have two options. A quick fix is to use a console command. I'm going to type it in here. It's r.raytracing.nanite.mode. Current value by default is set to 0. So what you do is once you type it in, so let me just type it again, r.tracing.nanite.mode. So that's it there. If you hover over it a bit, the current value set to 0. If I'll put a space and then type 1, press enter, and you can see it fixes this. But what is going on now is Lumen is no longer using the fallback meshes. It's using the full mesh. Now for my system, it's almost negligible because again, this is a very small scene, right, relatively. So you might not really see much of a difference, but this is just a quick fix. If you need to just do a quick render or animation, but for an interactive project, that will not do. So I'm going to change this back to 0. In this case, what I would do is I would not use nanites for this. I would use the LODs as I've shown you. So I'm going to select all three, Control B, right click, nanite, disable, and again, right click, asset actions, edit, selection in property matrix, and then LOD and type large prop. I won't do this now because these are very heavy and this will take quite some time. So just because this is live, I'll do this afterwards, but that's the way I'll solve this. Now, if you are using software ray tracing, meaning hardware ray tracing is not enabled, if you're having that same issue, what you can do is, okay, so first of all, let me show you what your scene or our scene looks like. So this is basically the Lumen scene. So I went here, went to Lumen scene. You will see that the meshes here are an approximation of the real meshes. So this is what Lumen is actually working with in the background. Okay. Now, if you're using software ray tracing, you would go to this icon, which is show. You would go to visualize, and you'll enable mesh distance field. So if you're not using ray tracing, you are using mesh distance fields, and this is the approximation that Unreal Engine gives you if you're using mesh distance fields. Now you will see that this floor lamp, for example, there's not enough detail for the rod. Now, if your scene is looking good, there's no need to come in and make any adjustment. But if you're having that same issue or shadowing issue, what you want to do is basically just increase the resolution. So for example, I will select this, open the mesh, and where do we have it? Distance field resolution scale. So I'm going to dog this down a little bit. By default, it's set to 1. If I increase this value to 2, for example, apply. Okay, we have some more resolution. 4, apply. So I think 4 is fine. Could even bump it up to 5 maybe. Perfect. So if you're having any, shadow issues, or you feel like you're not getting enough resolution of maybe the way the thing your model looks, for example, this chair, maybe you don't have enough shadows on the floor. It might be just because of the resolution of the mesh distance field for each mesh. So you will just, again, go into the mesh and adjust, increase the resolution scale. So just type 4, apply, see what we get. So that should help you make improvements. Again, if it's fine, if it's not broken, no need to make any adjustments. Great. Let me just bring this back, something like this. All right, cool. Making progress. Let's now bring in our tree. Or you know what? Let's paint our grass first. So I'm going to go back to the max scene. Select maybe the first the first 5. I don't need to select all of them. And I'm going to export via datasmith. What's happening? Hope it's just 3D Max, not my system. Okay. So that took a while. Datasmith, and I'll call this grass. Good. I think I can close this now. Let's import. Ensure that you're in your persistent level. Very important. Datasmith, file import, and grass. Ensure you select the Datasmith folder. Enable materials, import. Okay, good. So we have them here. First thing we want to do is save and then adjust the materials. So let's see what we have. Let's start with the master material. Okay, let me see if color is set to black. We don't even need it to be here, so I'm going to remove it. Let's start with the base node. This is set to surface, that's fine. Blend mode is going to be maxed, not translucent. It's not a glass material. Shading model is going to be two-sided foliage, and we want two-sided to be on. All right. There's no point having desaturation because it's already black and white. So I'm going to move this into opacity mask. Get rid of this. This works. Metallic. Where's metallic? This is roughness. Okay. Metallic doesn't need to be there. Sorry, this 0. Opacity mask. Normal map doesn't need all of these nodes. So I'm going to plug it in like this. Get rid of the rest. Okay, so the last thing now is, why is it looking weird? Surface, max, two-sided. Let me just reset this and see what happens. Okay. Let me try subsurface. Interesting. Okay, let me try something else then. I'll still save this. Let's go back to the material instance. I'm going to change the parents to our master material and then just slot in the textures. Okay, so base color, texture, drag and drop, roughness, done. Normal. So we're going to come down to the overrides and then change it from here, two-sided, shading model, two-sided foliage, and change this to max. So sometimes DataSmith just does weird things. So that's why it's always good to use your own material when you can. And last but not least, for the max texture, enable and drag and drop. Perfect. We can make other adjustments later, but that's material fixed essentially. Okay, good. Back to shaded. Let us paint our grass. Now all this while we've been in the selection mode, and as the name implies, is where you can select your meshes, make adjustments, you can move, rotate, scale, and all of that. If I click on this drop down, we have other modes. What the one we want to use right now is foliage. This is what you use to paint in your level. Okay, good. Let's go to geometries. This is the foliage tool set. We have the grass models. We need to drag this into here and use this. So we need to convert this from static mesh to a foliage. And just ahead of time, let me go back to the grass folder. Let me create a foliage folder here. You see where in a moment. I'm going to drag all 5 into here. And it's telling me that I have to save this as foliage and I have to select a folder or anywhere. So that's why I made a folder before. Unfortunately, for some reason, this has to be done one by one. So that's another reason why I did not want to import everything. 5 was enough. The moment that is done, you see that we have this purple, bluish purple thing. If I zoom back out, you just see that it's a large sphere, and that's the size of the paintbrush. So let us bring that down a whole lot. 40. Okay, that's good. Immediately without any settings, let's just drag, or we can start painting the grass on static meshes. Okay, going to undo, or to erase, you hold down Alt, not Alt, Shift, and while painting, you can also erase. All right, good. So let me make this much smaller. So let's say 20. You know what, let me leave that 40 for now. Let's look at some, not all of the settings. So we have our brush size, we have our paint density. So I'm going to crank this up to 1 and paint, not much of a difference per se. If you want to place just a single strand of grass or single mesh, you can click on this. What this will do right now is that it will, if I click once, it will plant all 5 in the same place, which I don't want. You can now change this to cycle to selected. So you can just click and it will randomly choose one of the 5. So if you want like to put your grass in some specific areas, that's one way of doing it. Going to undo. This filter just means this is what you can paint on. Right now we can paint on landscape. We don't have that in this project. We can paint on static meshes. If I disable this, you see that that brush no longer exists. You can paint on translucent meshes, obviously, for obvious reasons. Obviously, if you want to do that, then you'll enable it. Now, some of the ones we look at here is we're on paint. Erase is the same thing as just holding down shift while painting. We want to look at fill. So what fill we do is, if I select this, if I click to fill the static mesh that I select, right? If I want to just paint on the carpet alone, click on the carpet, it paints on the carpet alone. So that's what fill does, and that's what we'll be using here. Some other settings, so these are like, the most important ones. Some other settings are on the static mesh themselves. So you won't see anything until you select them, or rather the foliage. Now with them selected, this is where you can really crank up the density. Right now it's set to 100. If I make this 1000 and use the fill tool again, see we have a whole lot more, right? I can select all and remove. So let's do something quickly while let me fill again. Grass is very dark, so let's go to our material. I can close this. Let's look at what we have. First of all, I'll enable the subsurface multiplier. Try one. We don't have any direct sunlight, so you won't see much of a difference, but at least it's no longer pure, it's no longer very dark. Fetching it back to 0, this is what we had. So 2 is fine. And I'll also just increase the brightness to 2 as well. We're inside the room, so it's expected. If it was outside, you will see the grass in all its glory. So that's fine. I think it is okay. By the time we build it here, we'll see if we want to make any more adjustments. I'll dock this here for now. Can close this, close this. Okay, so I'm going to select all and remove. So where were we? We did selected, we have density. So typically what I do is I would crank this up to the maximum, which is 10,000. I don't think I can go beyond 10,000. Now if I paint again, see it is very, very dense, almost not realistic, and it's actually very heavy. What I like to do instead is crank it up to the maximum and then use a radius instead. So what this radius means is the distance between every grass mesh, there'll be like a distance between each of them when you increase the radius. Because it's set to 0, they are all clumped together. So I will increase this to, let's do something drastic. So let me type 50 and click. So you can see, even though this is set to 10,000, there is somewhat of a distance. I mean, it's not perfect, but you get the idea. So I'm going to bring, I think typically I use 5, between 5 and 10. Let's see what 5 gives me. In this instance, 5 is actually still very dense. Let me try 10. So you can start to see some gaps, unless you have a perfectly mowed lawn, in real life, it depends. If you want to have more patches, you increase the radius. And the radius would also depend on the mesh you're applying the grass to. So let's come here. Let's click, and this is still quite a lot for me. So I'm going to try 15, click. Okay, we're getting there. Another thing we want to adjust is the size. Again, at this point, it's all down to your preference, but I want to make it slightly smaller, and that will be done here. Again, because this is not, technically vegetation, I'm not focusing on vegetation. I'm not going to go through, all the settings, but, feel free to just take your time and try and see what they all do. But the one we're looking for now for scale is this. We have minimum and maximum scale. Even though it's set to scale X, because we are uniform, it will affect X, Y, and Z. If I change this to free, then it can affect the other axes as well, but I'll set it back to uniform so that it affects all the axes. So for the minimum, I want it to be, let's say 0.5 and maximum 0.7, so there's some variation. And I'll click again. I think that's fine. Now you can see that we need to now reduce the radius. 10, click. Not bad. Go down to 6. Okay, so let me just try. I'll leave it at 7.5. Also, you can, even when you are done like this, you can click a second time. That will make it slightly more dense. Or if you want, to put in those extra strands of grass, then you can go back to paint, go to single and cycle through, and you can just fill it up however you want. And with that, I'm good to go. It's not perfect in the sense that we have some spillages or some imperfections. If typically you'll be doing this on the exterior large outdoor area, so these kind of things may not necessarily be an issue. But what we can do is just take our time and either Let me see. Can move, just move, select and move them in place. All right, so that's basically what you need to do. So for the sake of time, I won't be trimming all of them, but that's the whole idea. Okay, cool. So grass done. Let's go back to selection mode and let's save. We'll definitely need to increase the brightness, but let's just continue for now. Now let's bring in our tree. Again, this will not work, or the trees will not show properly if you don't enable the procedural vegetation plugin and enable the nanite foliage in the project settings. So once you've done those two, let's go to Fab and want to search for mega plants. So these are, again, like I said, these are trees that are made by Epic Games for free. It's a library that has been growing over the past, I think, almost 2 years, if I'm not mistaken. When it first came out, I think it was just 6 or 7 um, models. Now they have almost over 20, so it's growing. Very nice library, very realistic trees. The one we want to use, or the one I want to use, is the Megascans Black Alder. So I'll click on that, and we can either add to the project directly, or you can add to your library, and then from there add to your project. If you add this to your library, which I've done, you will find it in your Epic Games launcher. You open it, go to Unreal Engine, go to library, and this is where it's going to live. So like I said, over time I've gotten a lot of assets this way. So if I filter by typing mega plants, you see I've added a lot of them to my library already, and from here I will just simply add to any project I'm working on. So but from here, let's just add to the project, accept, and it will download. It take a while depending on your internet speed. Good, that seems to be done. Let me just dock this here for now. It will come into a folder called Mega Plants Library, and you see the tree Black Alder, and we want to go to tree Black Alder 01. These trees come in as skeletal meshes, not static meshes. Skeletal meshes are, an example is like our character, first person character, and that's a skeletal mesh because you can create animations with them. We won't be doing that with the tree, but it's a skeletal mesh. The one I'm going to use is, let me try D. They are quite large, and the very first time you bring them into your project, it can take a while because they're also very heavy, but they work well with nanites. If you're not using nanite in your project, I would advise against using these trees because they're very, very large, not just in terms of the size, but like the poly count. You will see once this comes in. Again, it's for whatever, well, it's only the first time that you want to load it that it takes a while to bring in. If I want to bring in it, if I want to bring it in the second time, it will come in almost immediately. So it's doing some calculation, some loading. So let's give it a while. Yeah, I think the poly count is in like the millions, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm just using this because it's free, right? You can decide to bring in your own tree from 3ds Max via DataSmith and adjust the poly count or adjust the material. So as you can see, it's very big. I'm going to scale this down 0.4. Let's see, still too big. 0.1. Okay, 0.2. 0.17. Okay, I think that works. All right, cool. That works. Again, let's look at some materials. Okay, so I just got a notification that there might be an error on my end in terms of internet speed. If you are online, can you comment and let me know if you can hear me properly? Am I still audible? Is the audio lagging? Is the video lagging? Let me know. Thanks. While I carry on. So let's look at this mesh. I'm going to double click here to open it. All right. Because Nanite is enabled, I'm trying to remember where to actually see the actual number of triangles, because this is Nanite, the optimized or the lower polygon count. I will see if I can remember where to find this later, because this is a skeletal mesh. But yeah, okay, so let's adjust the materials. Going to open element 1, which is for the leaves. Nice material instance. So there should be subsurface here, or translucency. Again, the names can vary depending on who makes it. So we're looking for, let me just check everything and be sure. Okay, yeah, so translucency, brightness, if I'm not mistaken. So let's see if that works. Going to increase this. So as I do that, more light permeates through the leaves. What I want to do actually now is let me bring the directional lights. And let's see the effects. Okay, good. So you can see we have this nice effect of the light going through the leaves. So I'll just leave it at 4 for now. Can adjust this much later. The assets are heavy, but they work well with Lumen. And like I said, if I try to bring this in again, it comes in second time. So it's only the first time that it just takes time to load and compute it. All right. I believe with this, we are ready to look into rendering and animating. Let me just move our sun position back. Excellent. Okay, let's save. I'm going to create a new folder called sequence or sequencer. New folder. Okay. Now, I think, if I'm not mistaken, in previous classes, and if I've not, let's go over it now. If you want to create quick bookmarks where you can save your location, let's say I'm working on a project and I like this view, right? Have I saved one before? Okay, I have. So you can press, let's say I like this view, for example. You can press Control and either 1 to 0 on your keyboard, so Control and 6. That will save it as a bookmark. And I can always come back to it by pressing 6. So yeah, I think I covered this in a previous session because I've saved some bookmarks here. Now that's one way of saving bookmarks. And if I press G to hide the icons, I can just press F9 to take a quick screen grab or screenshot. And when I click on that here, it goes to this folder. So you'll find it in the project folder, go to saved, go to not autosaves, where screenshots, Windows editor, and then this is the screenshot we just took, right? It will take the screenshot based on how big the viewport is. So if I want larger size, just press F11, press F9 again, can click on the name here before it disappears, and that will open the folder for you. So that's the quickest way of getting your render out. It's not the best quality, but it's quick and fast. Let me press F11. Now to add a proper camera to take your render, so working on animation, we want to Let me see. Okay, so there are two ways. We can, while we are also in the viewport like this, I'll click on perspective and you can create camera. Now we have two options, create camera actor and sign camera actor. I would always go for sign camera actor because you have more options, particularly for ArchViz. A camera actor is good for maybe making games. You don't want a lot of properties, but a sign camera actor is good for ArchViz work. So create camera, sign camera actor. I'm gonna just escape and click away and move away. Purge it to bring out your icons, and our camera is here. You can come here, do the same thing, create camera, and we create one here. Now when you select when you select the camera, it shows the preview. Select this, shows the preview. To look at this scene through the camera view, once they are created, you will see the list of cameras here. So click on this. We're in the first one. I can see the aspect ratio. This is like 16 by 19. Your typical 1080 by 920 1920 by 1080 or HD 4K like that. You can switch to as many as you have, and if you want to come out of this, you click on eject and you come out of moving the camera. Now once you are in the camera or using any of them, when you move, you're actually also moving the camera location. So if I move here and eject, you see that the camera has now moved towards that location. Okay. Let's see. Typically for, again, there are many ways to work with Unreal Engine. So I'm only going to show you, my own preferred method, right? I typically don't do this. What I do instead is I create now this is when it comes to renders. I create a level sequence. So I'm in the sequencer folder, right click, create a level sequence. I'll just leave the name as default. Double click, that brings up a timeline. Now, if yours is, not docked, you can just bring it down here. Ensure it's docked at the bottom, so it's going from left to right, and you can bring this down. Now, I think I would go through some of these icons as we go along, but first of all, to add a camera to this, I will just click on the camera icon. So click, that brings up this camera. Now what this means is this camera only exists inside this level sequence, not in the level. Again, it's a preference and it's just the best way in terms of exporting your renders, because even to export your renders, you need to have a level sequence. So it's just best to, do it this way. Okay, let's see. So we have our timeline goes from 0 to 150 for now. A very important thing is your frames per second. If you want to create in 60 FPS or 24 FPS, this is where you set it. Typically, for most ArchViz work, 30 is fine, so we'll leave it at that. Um, 150 frames divided by 30, that's 5 seconds. If you want to make this longer, what you need to do is, because right now it's defined by this green mark and this red mark. So what you want to do is, first of all, click on this number here and extend the timeline. So let's say I want to make this 6 seconds. So I'll extend the timeline to 180. I'll bring the playhead here to 180. I can manually move this red line, but once my playhead is here, I can click on this icon here and that will move the red line. And then you also want to extend this camera sign actor to snap here. So now this is a 6-second timeline. Whatever happens beyond and before won't get exported when you're exporting. What is important is everything needs to be inside the green and red markers. So you can have stuff that goes on beyond, but when you export, it won't be exported. Okay, we'll get back to snaps. So let's see. We have our camera here. We have some settings. It's the same. It will be the same setting as the other cameras that we previously just made. So it's the same thing. So that we can see more, I'm going to dock the levels and layer to the side. So we can see some more. Bring it down a bit. Okay, good. Um, yes. Now this blue icon means that right now we are inside the camera. If I click on it, that's the camera there. So I've just like ejected. If I click back, we are looking through the camera. It's the same thing as clicking on this to eject, and that's the camera there. It's the same thing as clicking here and coming back into the camera. Now, if I save and close this, the camera is no longer in the scene. It only exists in this level sequence. So essentially, if you want to have 20 shots, you're going to have 20 level sequences with different, properties for each camera. So let's open it back. Let's go back to the camera view. Let's now look at a few settings. Let me see. Okay. So with the camera selected, let's run down the most important ones we're going to use, or that you'll be using most of the time. I'm going to collapse everything. As usual, there are quite a number of settings. So let's collapse just so it doesn't look overwhelming. Okay. Now from transform to post-process is what you will need 99.999% of the time. All the rest here, I've never used them personally. Again, depends on how far you go in your journey. So we'll be covering from transform all the way down to post-process. So transform is pretty straightforward. You can adjust the location, rotation, scale, and that is the same thing we have here. So by default, when you add the camera, it also comes with a transform node. So it's the same thing here. Anything you adjust here will also get adjusted here, so they are connected. Okay. Actually, I don't think scale will make a difference because you're looking through the camera, so it doesn't make a difference. Next is current camera settings. This is where a lot of the magic happens. And go again. I won't cover all, but we'll go through the most important ones. Let's see where do I start with. Film back. Okay. So film back. This shows you your, let's say, the aspect ratio or the limits of what the camera is seeing in your scene. Right now, this is a 16:9 aspect ratio. There are other presets here. If you want IMAX, this is like a maybe 4:3 aspect ratio. Typically, I use default for most of my animations. You have sensor width and height. Now, this is, once you lock down your aspect ratio, right, this is almost irrelevant because when we're exporting, that's where you set your resolution. Do you want it to be HD, 4K, but where this comes into play is, say you want to render an image, and that image is 4,000 pixels by 3,000 pixels, for example. You need to match that aspect ratio here. Then when we get to export, we will get the actual resolution. So if you are doing 4,000 by 3,000, you want to do 40 mm by 30 mm, so that way the aspect ratio is correct. If you don't do it this way and you export, you're going to have bars, like black bars, either at the top or side, depending on the configuration of your render. So sensor width and height gets important when you have a specific resolution you want to export. So if you want to export something with, I don't say something ridiculous. If you want to export something like, let's say, 225 by 7,000 pixels, for example, right? And you will type 25 by 70, and then you would walk like this, and you know exactly what your image will look like with that aspect ratio. Hope that makes sense. For now, I'm going to reset everything to default. Sensor horizontal offset. You can shift the image horizontally or vertically. Okay. While we are here, just so that before we keep on going down, let's say you like this shot, right? This is the shot you want for your render for this particular camera. and you don't want to, mistakenly move it, because that's prone to happen. Once you have the shot you like, select the camera, go to your outliner. The camera will only exist, like I said, as long as the sequencer is open. So you right click, go to transform, and then lock item movements. So with that selected, no matter what I do, I can't move the camera, so it's locked in place. That way you won't mistakenly move it. So for now, I'm just going to unlock, because I like to be free. Transform and remove. Okay, good. So let's go down our list. So that's basically film back, right? Now we have lens setting. This basically covers, if you're into photography, you would know a lot of, all of this. I'm going with more of an artistic sense. So, but these are different lenses that your camera can have. So 12 mm lens, 50 mm lens, if you know exactly what you're looking for. But basically, I just set these things manually. So what has happened now is, okay, I've reset it, but you can see this has kind of skewed this. Let me see. So we have minimum focal length, maximum focal length, and that affects, or basically your current focal length here is, how do I explain it? This is the minimum and maximum that we can get. So right now I'm going to type 20. I can see we've zoomed back out. So by default, I think a new camera comes with 30 or 35. So for a space like this, I think 20 is fine. If I change this, let's say to 50 mm, you see that it has changed the minimum and maximum focal length to 50, because it's a 50 mm lens, right? But when I reset, I need to just shake this or type this back. It essentially overrides whatever is going on here. But for this class, I'm just going to use the universal and adjust the focal length, myself. Okay, what next? We have aperture. This affects the amount of depth of field that we have. We'll get into setting that up. We won't see much now because our focal length is small, but the lower the number, the higher the effect. For now, I'll just leave it at 2.8. We'll come back to this. And that's that for crop settings and for lens settings rather. So now focus settings. It's a very nice one. Let's see. Okay, good. So let's use this chest piece as an example. So right now, the closer we are to this piece, you can see it's blurred while the background is in focus. And that's because by default, the manual focus distance is set to, is this 100,000? Yeah, so it's quite far into the scene. We can adjust this number so that it focuses on any mesh we want. So let's say we want to focus on this. What we will do is, where are we? Focus settings, drag this number down. Now to see this in action, we need to enable the draw debug focus plane. It'll be purple color. I'm going to bring this way down so it's now in our scene. Bring it down till it reaches the piece. And once it's done, I can disable this. You now see that it's now in focus and the background is out of focus. And that's why we can now start to play with our aperture. If I reduce this to 1, the depth of field is much more pronounced. If I increase it to, let's say 8, less pronounced but still there. So this is how you can start to adjust, your depth of field. So set this back to default value. Now the way we've done this now, we've manually just adjusted this. If I move away from the rook, you see that I'm out of focus because it's only going to focus 30 centimeters in front of me. And the next way, okay, and a faster way of doing this actually, instead of having to drag the slider, you can just click on this sample icon, click on the mesh you want to focus on. I need to do that. I want to focus on the ship there. This is now out of focus. If I want to focus on This other one, you see, is not in focus, out of focus. So that's a quick way of just shifting the focus. But if you want to, there's a second way of doing it. You can track any mesh you want. Now with tracking, you no longer have the numbers here. We have your tracking focus settings. And with this, you can track any mesh you want. So I'm going to pick the mesh, or you can click on this and you see a drop down of all the meshes in your scene, but it's just faster to track it if you can see it in front of you. Oops. Let me do that again. First of all, let me just zoom in and ensure I select it. So now it's in focus. I'll enable the debug. And no matter where I go, it's always going to focus around that area. So let me turn it off. So you see that it's always going to be in focus no matter what. Okay. Going to reset. So what I did, okay, so hold on, let me undo. I enabled this. Okay, so there are two tracking. So this is like the tracking point. What I enabled before was a focus plane. So again, the same thing, because it's focused, that plane will not move. It will only rotate based on where my camera rotates, but it's always going to be focused on whatever mesh you are tracking. So I'm going to reset. Moving on to crop. To be honest, I don't use, okay, well, I mean, this is where we have the current focal length. So again, it's the same thing, and then current aperture. So that's what those two do. You can crop it to, an aspect ratio of 4.3, 16 by 9, which is what it is by default. Because if I reset it now, nothing will change. Or again, I don't use this that often, but it's there. And advanced, so we have we have custom near clip plane. So for whatever reason, let's say, let me give an example of where this can be useful. Okay, I'm going to increase my focal length to 50. Let's say I want to move back and capture more of the kitchenette, but as you can see, as I'm moving out, I'm moving outside the building, I can increase the clip plane, the near clip plane, so that it cuts what is in front of me. And then it's not perfect, but I can get more of what I'm trying to capture. If I change it back to 1, I'm obviously outside the project. So at 350, I can still do what I want to do, and it doesn't affect. Well, yeah, so like I said, there's a limit, but this definitely helps. So that's what this does. Camera options, nothing doing here, at least for this session. And then post-process volume. Now, this is a very nice one, because even though we have our post-process volume, there might be a particular camera shot that might be too bright or too dark, or you want to adjust something specific, and you don't want to always have to come back to your post-process volume just to edit for that camera and come back and change. So every camera has some post-process settings. So like our lens, you can adjust exposure, bloom, color grading, almost what you would have in your post-process volume. And the good thing is that by default, this overrides your post-process volume. So say I want this shot to be less exposed, right? I will enable exposure. Now don't forget, our post-process volume currently is set to 2, right? So if I click on this and enable it, it already gets darker because it's set to 1. So I mean, if this is what I want for this camera shot, then that's perfect. The moment let me just save. The moment I escape or eject or close the sequencer, then I'm back to the normal or the exposure for the post-process volume. So it's a very nice tool to have. That way you can, every camera can have its own exposure or its own settings depending on what you're trying to achieve for that camera. Okay. And I think we've covered most of what, if not everything on the camera side of things. Okay, good. I won't before I think it's best I show you how to export renders and animations after I've shown you how to create, camera animations, right? So now that we've covered the basic settings or properties of the camera, let's start to create some sequences. And I think it's just best to use the one I created for this particular session. Okay, so we'll go through everything and I'll explain a few things and we'll try and recreate some of them are repeats. So we'll do some basic ones, we'll do some more interesting ones, and then you see how basically I built this all together, right? So this is a simple camera pan. This is just moving the camera forward. Again, moving forward, top down. You can see that we have some nice depth of field here because I'm focusing more on this area. There's some depth of field here because this is just the area I was focusing on. So I'm just panning down and rotating the camera from left to right. The way this was done was I exported the day level and the night level, and then in DaVinci Resolve, I just superimpose them and then cut off at a particular point. So you see that this was focused on initially. Let me move back a bit, and then it shifted to this area. So I'll show you how to animate your depth of field for this effect. Again, the same thing, just day and night, same exports, and you just clip it. Okay, so this one, I just exported to where I to go back and just reverse the animation instead of exporting the whole thing, right? So that helps to save some time. Now, remember I said we should enable the accumulated depth of field. You will see it in action, but that helps with very thin line geometry like this. If we use a normal depth of field, when you see it, it will be very blurry, but that accumulated depth of field helps to make this look much nicer and smoother at the cost of increasing render time. But I think the results speaks for itself. Okay, just moving left to right, but also rotating the camera. Same thing, just panning the slight rotation. Same thing. And then we'll definitely cover this as well, how this was done. Okay, good. So let us start with, so I'm going to recreate this shot. I'll recreate this one. Then we'll just jump straight to maybe, let me see, this is our straightforward. The depth of field here, we'll jump straight to this. Or maybe we'll do this kitchen one first. But anyway, let's do step by step. So this first shot, let's start with this one. I will rename this O1. Okay, let me also say a few things when it comes to creating animations, right? I would liken it to, creating music. There's some people that they have their lyrics first. Some people have their beats. Some people just, it just formulates in their mind as they go along. So this particular project, the way I worked on it was I did not have I didn't have any audio in mind I wanted to use. But as I was working on the project, I was, I mean, while you're working, you're moving around, you get inspired by certain view, like, okay, this would be a nice place to animate, and you just quickly create a quick animation, or you save a bookmark to remind you that, okay, you want to animate something. So as I was working, I was creating quick shots, nothing serious, but just something that I felt would look good, right? Just so even before I was done with the project, I almost kind of had my animation down in the sense that I had almost 20 clips. I didn't know how many I was going to use. I didn't know how long I wanted the animation to be, but I had enough clips that I felt looked interesting. Most of what, again, this is just one style I like, I like cuts. Some people, it depends on what you want to do. You might just have one camera movement that goes all the way, but if you want something like, trying to tell a story, I think it's just nice to have simple shortcuts that move to different places, and you have a good idea of what you're trying to communicate. Um, so it was after I had my cuts or shots that I started searching for different soundtracks. If you, in the description of this video, you see a link to the actual audio I use, so you can download it and use it as well, and also look at other audios on that website. Okay, good. So let us start. So it's open. I jump into the camera. I'm going to move back a bit, hide the icons, and I think this can be lower. Let's say 18. So something like this. I'm also going to enable the lighting mode. Let me see. Okay, so for this shot, I'm going to increase the exposure. So I'll just type exposure. No wonder, because I was wondering why it was a bit dark. So yeah, I'll disable it and we're back to, okay, so good, that's fine. I forgot to reset it then. Yes, I just enabled the lighting, the mood lights, right? And we can see them. One very important thing to note, if I decide to export this now, this is not going to, it's not going to export the lighting mood, the mood light. It's only going to export the day level. That's because of these green dots in front of this. Remember, the persistent level will always show. The lighting, the other levels, if you want it to show when you're exporting your scene, you want to right click and change streaming method to always loaded. Right now, these two are set to blueprint, meaning unless I use blueprint to enable it, it won't work. And we've not got into blueprint yet. So if I export this, this level will not show, even though I put it on here. So what I want to do is also right click, go to change streaming method and change it to always loaded. Now that green dot is gone, and when I export, those two levels will export as well. Even if I turn on this third level, the night level, if I export, it won't export. So just very important to note. Okay, so before you start anything, ensure that your playhead is at 0 mark, right? If this is the first shot or the first location you want, I will click on this button, this add keyframe in front of transform. You can expand this, doesn't matter. Make sure you click on transform on the one on top, and that will create a location, rotation, and scale key, right? And then I move this to the end at 180. I move left and also look down a bit. And again, second keyframe. Now I can move this back, press play, and it makes that movement. Another way you can play is just once you move it back, just press your tab spacebar, and that will play it. Okay, so this is 6 seconds, right? Another good thing to know is when I was making the animations, right, or the different shots, I did not really care about how long this was going to be. I just knew I liked this animation. By the time you get your audio, depending on how you want the animation to sync, you might feel like, okay, this particular second, you want it to be 5 seconds or 4 or 3, then you can come back and make adjustments, right? What is more important for me right now is the camera movement, how it looks. The speed, the length can always be changed afterwards. Okay. You also notice something. This is moving, it starts out slow, has steady pace, and then towards the end, it slows down. For ArchViz animations, you typically won't see this unless there's a specific reason. You want to have a constant camera movement for your different clips so that it doesn't just feel as if there's this start, stop flow, right? So it's just one simple movement. And to do that, simply select all the keyframes, right click. Right now we're on cubic auto. You want to change this to linear. You see changes from circle to triangle. Now once I play, see just consistent movement throughout. Now while I'm in this sequencer, if I make any other key, if I make any other keyframe, it's always going to be triangle. But the moment I make a new sequence, it's going to go back to the default. So to change that behavior so that everything comes in as linear, you click on this icon here, change it from cubic to linear. So there's always the option to change from here. So your next sequencer will always add linear keys. Okay, good. So first shot done. Now for a shot like this, where you don't necessarily want to focus on anything specific, right? I typically just leave the default aperture and manual focus distance. It works fine for shots where you're not really focusing on anything direct. It's like even this one that is close to you, see it's out of focus a bit, the way a real life camera would work. This is more in focus, this is more in focus, so this actually works. It now depends on you. If you are specific about something, you can now start to make adjustments. But for shots like this, I just leave the default values. I will just only control the focal length. I want to see more or less. Obviously, there's a point that starts to look weird. So 2018, sometimes even 16. Again, it depends on, for me, as long as it looks good, right? I think that's my own rule of thumb. So save. Another thing you can do to have a nice reference, because this looks, I mean, you can kind of tell it has a not so good preview. If you want something better, you can right click, go to asset actions, capture thumbnail, and you have to save, and then you have a better thumbnail. The problem with this is if you make any change and save again, it cancels that. So what I would do instead is capture thumbnail. If you want to save, just save it on top. So if I make a change, so let me just literally make a change. You see that it has an asterisk, just save on top of it and you maintain the thumbnail. I forget a lot of times and come here and save. So unless I need to, I'm not so big. It's just that it's nice to have it this way. I don't particularly like the way it looks like this, but it's one of those things. I don't know if it's a bug because in previous versions I never had this issue. By default, it had a good preview, so I don't know. All right, moving on. For the next shot, which is going to be this one, because you have one shot already, right? And if you like the settings and the timeline and everything, there's no point starting again. Just duplicate. Name this O2. Open. All you want to do is essentially just delete the keyframes that you have in here and pick your first mark. So let's say here, for example, I put the keyframe there. Now, before I move forward, let me show you two more things. For a shot like this, that is just, I'm just moving horizontal, straight, forward, backward, left or right. You want to ensure that your rotation is set to 0. So roll is 0, correct. Pitch. Okay, let me see. Sorry, my camera wasn't selected. Let me undo that. Select camera. Pitch should be 0. Okay. The reason why it's not showing is because when I entered the sequencer, I did not go into the camera. So right now I'm just moving the viewport, not the camera. So always go into your camera or pilot your camera. And now let me delete what I just did. So come back here, starting position. So it can be rough, right? Just pick a rough point. You add a keyframe and then you can adjust your roll and pitch. That's your X and Y rotation, so it's straight. Your yaw as well, because we are just going straight, should be 0 as well. If you want to face the other way, it will be 180, and then you can adjust, you can go left or right. So I'm going to set everything back to 0. It keys that for you automatically because you're adjusting it on that key. If I make a mistake and move forward and adjust the number, it's already going to start to add keyframes. So you just simply delete it. Ensure you're on that key and make whatever change you want to make. Another nice tip is, now I would move this forward to 180. Again, that's 6 seconds. If you don't, if you want to save time by, if you don't want to move forward, then add a keyframe. What I'll do instead is, let me snap back to the beginning. What I'll do instead is enable this like auto key. So move to 180 and then move forward. And when it's done, you see that it made a key for us. Now it only keyed in the location. That's because we did not work on we did not rotate, or scale doesn't work. So it only keyed in what was necessary. So that's an option. But if you just want full manual control, so let me again delete this. So it will snap us back to the beginning. When you move forward, you just add your keyframe and transform. And that will just keys everything. Okay. So let's look at a few things. Let's say this was too slow. We want it to be faster. While at the very end, ensure you're at 180. I will just move forward a little bit more. Override that initial key. So now it's moving faster. Obviously, we don't want this to end we don't want this to get to the very end. Although the way I also work is sometimes I like to just render a lot. So okay, let me explain. For example, this shot. Okay, that shot was quite long, but that shot was like maybe 5 seconds, right? I would typically have this more than 5 seconds, and when I export, I can crop somewhere at the beginning, somewhere at the end. I'm not always fixed on framing exactly what, because sometimes you want some leeway. You might want something more in one area or less. So I don't always aim for everything should be perfect on this end. I rather just export the sequences and then arrange them in Premiere Pro or DaVinci Resolve. We'll get all of that today as well. Okay, so that takes care of that. If let's say I want this to happen in 5 seconds, when we made these keyframes, we have this bar at the top. I can drag this down to 150, or let's say 4 seconds, and you see that it's now much faster. But one thing you should always do when you are done, you also need to bring this down again to 4 seconds. Otherwise, if you export this, it's going to export all of this movement, then it's not going to export this as well, because it's always going to export between the green and the red markers. So just going to undo this, bring this back here, and come back a little bit, and keyframe. All right, good. So these are next second shots. Let's look at the next one. Okay, so let's do this. Again, I will just asset actions, create thumbnail. You have to save for you to see it. For the third one, let's just create a new sequencer, just so that you just get used to it. So level sequence, O3, open this up. So add the camera, enter the camera. It's always, it will be on by default. I'm going to delete this keyframe that was made, and let's go to the kitchenette area. Okay, so this is almost like what we had before. I forgot to put, so in the previous one I put rectangular lights in here to shine down, so that helped to make this better. So just, if you want to make the adjustments, so let's say something like this, right? And again, by default, any clip you make is always going to be 150 frames. So like I've shown you before, if you want to make it longer, you can increase it and drag. Well, I will just leave it like this. Okay, so I want to start from here, add a keyframe. Again, check your rotation to ensure that everything is zeroed out. Your yaw will be left the way it is because you obviously want it to look where it's looking, but your roll and pitch should be set to 0. And then you move to the end and move down to as low as you want, and then keyframe. So we have nice movement like this. Now, as you will notice, because of the default um, manual focus, is the sofa is more in focus than the kitchenette. So I'll select the camera. I will go to focus settings and click on the hub. And right now you can see it's way more in focus. And just to be sure it's in the right place, you can enable the focus plane and you can see it's dead at the dead center. That's fine. So far it's out of focus. If you want to increase the intensity, go lower. It's more in focus. It also affects, this, because this is very close to the camera. So if you want this to also be in focus, then you need to increase this number as well, right? More in focus. Still slightly blurry. So where the aperture and focal length come into how they work is the higher the focal length, the more the more this will take effect in terms of the depth of field. So if I make this 60, I would obviously need to zoom back out, and this is where the clip plane comes in. Okay, I'm gonna type 300 for now. If I move back, so you can see that with the same aperture at 4, we have more depth of field because we've increased our aperture or our focal length. Now, this is another nice tip. It's good that I made this. I'm not saying mistake, but this is where we are. Now, my cursor is on 118, right? And if I move this cursor now, it's going to snap back to what I've already animated. But let's say I like this shot and I don't want to come back here and have to redo all of this. So what I'll do is I'll create a keyframe here. Well, to be honest, does it really make a difference? I'll still need to delete this anyway. But this has saved me in time of having to reset this, all of this. So with that keyframe, I can now bring this to the beginning, delete the old one. So this is now, can now come here, override this, bring this down and click, and we have nice animation. Cool. Save. I won't bother about the preview. Oops, we are not here yet. Let me close these other ones. Save. Let me just save all. Good. Moving on. So this is almost the same as the first clip. Yes. So let's look at depth of field, how to animate, how to make this move from one point to another. I'm going to reuse this one, so I'll just duplicate 04 because I like the focal length at 60. Enter the camera, delete the keyframes that were made, so it's a fresh start. And I'm also going to remove the clip plane. Now let's move to okay, so something like this. Where is focus setting? I'm going to click on this one. So this is in focus. And I actually like this position, so let me even move in more. You know what, let's use this. So first one, going to create a keyframe here. Also going to create a keyframe for the aperture, but I think 4 is too this effect is too much. Let's try 8, 12. Okay, let's leave this for now. So I'm going to create a keyframe 12. So at the beginning, this is what we have. And let's work on the camera animation first. You know what? I think this should be further back a little bit, something like here. So override that keyframe, move to the end, and move like this. Click. I also want to make this 6 seconds, so I'm going to extend my playhead. Click here to bring the end marker. Then also not the whole thing, just ensure you have this icon, drag this, and then extend the animation too. All right, good. So it's very simple. At this point, this is where we have our focal length, and rather manual focus distance, and let's say somewhere at the middle, you want it to shift to this area. So I will also again click and create a keyframe, so it locks in this entire place as the same focus distance. Then after it splits a few number of frames, it will animate to that location. So what I'll simply do is select the camera, scroll down to manual focus, and click on any of these. And once you've done that, put a keyframe. Okay, so I actually locked in the wrong, I was clicking on the wrong keyframe, so that's fine. We'll go in reverse. First of all, let me delete the aperture because it doesn't matter. It's going to be constant throughout. So from here, this went back to this. So I'll put a key manual focus here. So to be honest, you don't even need to have a keyframe at the beginning because anything behind this is going to be that keyframe. Anything beyond is going to be this value of this keyframe. So that's basically it. Once it goes here, it changes to that. So that's basically how you animate that depth of field effect. Now, I said, we enabled the accumulated depth of field in the plugins. Let me now show you how it works. To add this to this camera, have the camera selected. Then we have in the details panel, click on add and type DOF. You see accumulation DOF, depth of field. So you click on that. So that's now added it as a component of this camera. Now to see this in action, let's see. There are a few settings here which by default they work, so I won't touch it, but let's see this in action. If I can remember where it is. Thank you very much. So I would click on accumulate and it will just build for a few seconds, and this is the result. So if I turn this off, this is the depth of field without the accumulation, and this is depth of field with it on. You can see you have much nicer results, right? For this particular shot, it's not too bad. You'll be in motion, so it's not something that your eyes might necessarily pick, especially if you don't know the difference. And like I said, if you turn this on, it's going to take longer to export your the animation where you have depth of field. Where this is very important, or where this comes very helpful, is where you have very thin geometry, right? Without this depth of the depth of field for all these lines were not so good. So that's where for this, right, if you are pressed for time, you can remove it. If I disable it now, so again, this is just a preview. As long as it is here, it's going to take effect in your export. So I will remove it if you don't want to have it there. For the sake of this class also, I'm going to remove it because we're going to do a little export. So I'll delete. But it was basically that's how to animate the depth of field effects from one point to another. Good. And to be honest, I think every other shot is just a repetition of what we've done already. So the last one I want to look at is, yes, that brings me to another issue I found out after our last class. So let me save. Let's go to our pebbles. Let me also bring the sun back. Yeah, I'm surprised I didn't see it before when I brought the sun, but anyway, glad I remembered. We have some weird shadowing going on here. It's almost like the light is not going beyond this point on the mesh. It just looks, super weird. And after a little bit of tinkering. To solve this, you want to open the material and you want to expand or enable the displacement scaling, and what you want to adjust is the center. So right now at 0.5 is like this is in the middle. If I change it to 0, it moves all the way up, but now you can see that the sunlight is coming in properly. If I move this to 1, it's all the way down and it doesn't work. Default is 0.5, that's why it's like half of it is in the sun. And it won't matter if I move it up. So it's not about where it is in the real world. If I move this up, it doesn't make a difference. What's important is this center should be set to 0. Save. And now I will just move this back down, hold down Control for a final adjustment. And yes, that looks way better. I was wondering why it was looking off before. Okay, good. All right. Okay, let's carry on to the last. Yeah, so animating this is actually easier than it looks. I'm going to make a new level sequence O5. Okay, so far we've just been animating camera, right? You can animate anything in your scene, anything that can be selected and that can be transformed can be animated, right? So I'm not going to bother. I won't add the camera right now. Let's animate the meshes. Okay. To add your mesh to the sequence, the sequencer, two ways. You can have it selected. Let me select these three. In the outliner, I can just drag them in here. By default, they will all come with a transform node, which is all we need. But a faster way is to, while they're selected, press Shift and E. That will bring them in. Now, Shift and E is also the shortcut to select similar. So let me close this. If I select one, Shift and E will select similar. Now, if I have my sequencer open, when I press Shift and E, unfortunately, that will bring that into the sequencer. So just have that in mind. So I'm going to delete this. All right, good. Also going to delete the keyframes that come with it by default. So it's all empty. So let's start with this one. So the trick is, it starts out somewhere in the air, and at the end, it comes down to this point. So what we're going to do, we're going to work in reverse. Select all three, and because I know that at the end they're going to be in the right location, I'm going to add a keyframe for all three of them, right? And now I'm going to move back to the beginning and just move them to wherever I think will be nice. So again, move this. If I go to the rotate tool, because I want something very abstract or not, on the axis, I can click anywhere that is not on the axis, and that will give me a weird, or a rotation that is not on any of the axes, so looks more natural. So I'm going to move this here, and that is this one. Put a keyframe, and when I play, it simply comes down. So I'm going to go back, the same thing, move this one up, move it forward, maybe rotate it like this, some weird angle. The trick is to ensure that they also do not touch and they are far away from each other. So that's one on top, create a keyframe, and the bottom, the last one, rotate, move it up, move it here a bit, move forward, and create a keyframe. Now, once I hit play, you want to check that they're all coming well. So perfect. I will add this one because I want to explain how I also did the chessboard and the pieces. At the end, you will see them. They were not there before, then they come in, scale, and they all pop in like that. So I'll show you how that was done. So again, select the table, Shift and E to bring it in. I'm at the very end now. I'll delete the automatic keyframe that was made, put my own keyframe at the very end, move this back to the beginning, move this, let's say up, rotate, let me go up, and then add the keyframe. I won't bother with the rest because you get the gist. Now you can eventually you might have a situation whereby you're animating 100 meshes, right? And you don't want this list to be incredibly long. So what you can do to kind of like have some order is to create folders. So you can have a folder for example, all these are furniture pieces. So I'll just create a new folder, call this furniture, and I can put all of this inside. So that way I'm much more organized. If I only want to see, okay, I haven't added the camera yet, so I was wondering when the camera was. So that way you can be more organized. Then for the chessboard and the items, I will add these ones in its own folder. So right now I'm done with furniture pieces. Another thing I want to do is, so let me expand these ones for now. This is a linear movement, which is fine at the beginning, but at the end, I want it to, slow down and be a bit soft towards the end, not just abruptly stop. So I can convert these ones back to cubic. So towards the end, it will just slow down. Just it's very slight, subtle movement, but I think that makes it look a bit better. Okay. Now let us add the chessboard and all the pieces. Okay, you know what? In fact, because of time, I'll just do this row of pieces. So because it's the same principle, there's no point doing the entire thing. So I'll select all of these with the chessboard. Shift and E will bring everything in. And just create a new folder now. Add folder, chess, drag everything in. Okay. While they're still selected, expand everything. Again, they all come with default keyframes. I'm going to delete them. So let's think about this logically. We know that at the end, right? Or in fact, let's do this. I'm going to make the animation for the furniture a bit shorter. So let's say 75, for example, let's say 90. So between now and 90, when all the furniture pieces settle down, I want the chessboard and the pieces to be hidden. So what I'm going to do is just scale them down to 0. So I will select everything. And I will set the scale to 0. You can also animate any property that you see that has this empty diamond means that it can be animated. It's the same thing as coming to click here, but it's way faster here because I can just animate everything at once instead of coming here and clicking for each one. So I'm going to change this to 0 and add a keyframe. Let me expand this. So we've added a keyframe for all of them. Let me just be sure. Yeah, okay. And then at this point, I want it to be 1. So I'll add a keyframe. So furniture pieces come down and then they scale up. Now to give it a little bit more interest, or to make it more interesting, at this point, I'm going to make it 1.1 and add a keyframe. So is that effect of it scales up and then just slightly scales down, so it makes it more dynamic. So let's see. So something like that. Also, I believe, yeah, before I did all of this, I should have converted everything to cubic instead of linear. It's not really giving that bounce. So unfortunately, let me see. Can I do this while they are compressed? I don't think so, no. So unfortunately, I have to expand everything and convert them to cubic. So while I'm scrolling up while I'm still holding down the left click to increase my selection. So that's everything. Right click, convert to cubic auto and compress everything back. Okay, good. So let's see that again. Yeah, much better. Now, if you want, something you want it to be much faster, you can simply select all of this and just scale this down. So that's why I said a lot of times I'm not really so concerned with the length. What's more important is getting the animation to look good. Then you can adjust, how fast or slow it takes. So, that pop looks much better. And the last thing now is they are all coming in at the same time. I want the board to come in first, so that's this one, and then the rest I will stagger them. I'm not sure of the order. Let me see. One, two. Okay, perfect. So they came in the right order. Again, I'm just using my eyes. Let's see if it works. If I need to extend it or not. This bar at the top is like the overall animation for everything. So you can extend the whole thing, but I'm just working on each individual one. So let's see what this looks like. Yeah, so I like that effect. Not too fast, not too slow. So that's the fact that we made it scale up and down just gives you that extra dynamic feel as against just it coming up. It will have that nice feel to it. So yeah, so that's it where I just did the rest of the pieces. So essentially that is it. There's not, I mean, there's a whole lot that can be done essentially, but I think with this you can really create a lot of cool animations and clips. Okay, I believe we've covered a lot or enough when it comes to the sequencer. What else? Let me see, is there anything I'm missing before we go on to exporting our renders and animation? I have a list here. Let me just see. Okay, I believe we are good. Now let us create some renders. I'm going to use the same sequences that we used. You can, or what? In a real project, I have different cameras for still images and different cameras for the sequencer, even though you can use the one for the sequencer. If it is the same image that you want, you will just only render a certain frame instead of rendering the entire length. But let's just create one or two new cameras. So level sequence, I'll call this O1 underscore still. Double click, add the camera, changes to 20. That's the focal length. Hey Kristen, no problem. You can always watch after the class, but thanks for being here. I'm sure you'll enjoy today's class once you go through it. All right, good. So I've made the camera. I'm not going to bother with settings. Let's just move on to how to export. You can always tweak your depth of field, where you want to focus on, and all of that. Also, again, you can right click. These are the ones that I would actually lock the transform so that I don't mistakenly, move the camera once it's set. Okay, good. Now to export a render, let's start with the render first. You want to click on this icon, which is render this movie to a video or image or frame sequence. So click on this. Okay, let me start again. So close this, click on this. This opens what we call the movie render queue, right? This is our O1 still configuration output. The output is where you're going to save to. By default, it saves all the images to your screenshot Windows Editor folder, or rather, actually, movie render. So let me go back. Where does that go? Saved. Let me see. Saved. Where is movie render? Or will it create one for us once we export? Okay, saved. How come I didn't see it? Movie renders. Okay, so all right, cool. That's it. So we'll change this to a different location. There are two ways you can set this up. You can either use the basic configuration, or you can use a movie render graph. So I'll show you both. The legacy preset is going to be it's no longer going to be in use, so we're just going to cover these two. So this is our basic setup. This is the name of our map, your output. So you can change the output directory. So I'm just going to go to Documents, Apartments, create a new folder for renders. So select folder. File name and format, I'm just going to leave this at default. Now, output resolution, this is the important one, right? I can expand this, and this is default 1920 by 1080. Now let's go back to our render. This will work because by default, the aspect ratio is set to 16 by 9, which in 1920 by 1080 will give you the right result. But let's say you want your render or image to be, again, let's use the previous example, 3000 pixels, right? I'm going to unlock the link so I can affect the X and Y separately by 2000 pixels, right? Let's see what's going to happen if we export without adjusting the aspect ratio here. Okay, EXR, JPEG, PNG. I typically use PNG because it has a lot of information. JPEG compresses your image, so I'll leave it as PNG, or I mean for now I can just use JPEG. You can export both at the same time, right? But I'll use JPEG for now. We are using deferred rendering. Remember that there's path tracing if you want. Now your number of warm-up frames, this is important because this is, how do I explain this? When I think we see it when we start rendering, but Unreal Engine being a real-time engine, some things need to warm up and kick on before the render starts so that the global illumination is showing, everything settles down before the rendering starts. If you just start rendering without the engine having its warm-up, the render will not come out good. So 64 is a good number to use. Temporal sample count, this is like super sampling. For a still image, you don't need to increase this for a still image, but when we are working on animation, I'll show you when this might come in handy. Let me see. Even spatial sample, rather, I was referring to spatial sample count. We'll increase this for animations, but I'm leaving both at 0. And then, yeah, I'll leave. So this is our basic settings. So let us render local and see what happens. Okay, I forgot one more setting, so I'm going to press escape to cancel this. Oh, there's warming up now. Ignore this. If you have this error, you can ignore it. It doesn't affect our renders. And truth be told, I don't even know what the error is. So I'm going to press escape. Now, what was going on was that it was going to render the entire sequence, right? That is from 0 to 150. And even though we've not done any animation, it's just going to export several of this. So we want to lock it to just one frame. We are going to go to custom start, custom end, and just set it to 0 and 1. That way it's just going to export one frame. So let us export or render. So it's doing the warm up, it's very fast, 64 frames, and it's done. So let's go to render, and this is our render. Now you will see that we have the bar at the top and bottom because the aspect ratio is set to 16 by 9. So that's why we're having this bar, because our export size is set to 3000 by 2000. So what we need to do to make this correct is come back to our camera, go to the film back and set your sensor width and height to 30 by 20. Now that's the right aspect ratio. And if we export again or render local, renders, let me see what happened. Okay, so this is set up correctly, 30 by 20. Okay, the output is set to renders, but okay, so I missed on that step. Once we are done setting this up, we need to save this as our own like setup, right? So I'm going to save this, save basic config as default. So now this, hold on, what's going on? Renders, right? Let me just render this again and see what happens. Okay, it's rendered correctly now, but I'm wondering why that didn't work before. Yeah, okay. Let's let's move on. So that's so again, your aspect ratio and your export output resolution is important. They have to like match. All right. Typically I don't use the basic, not because it's not good, but everything in Unreal Engine is moving towards um node-based, is moving towards node-based, which is where the graph comes in. So let me show you how this would work with the render graph. So I'm going to change this to graph. You can see it also change to graph here. So we were on basic before, we are on movie render graph now. Okay, now let me not make the mistake I made before. This movie render graph, if I search for it, it goes to the engine folder. So we want to create our own graph. Let me turn this off. So to open it, I'm just simply going to click on this to open, and you even get a warning. It says the default graph asset is being edited. Save as to make a new graph. So I'm going to go to File, Save As. I'm going to put this in the sequencer and just call this render graph underscore still. So still image. And all of this basically is almost the same thing we had in the basic, but it's just in graph form, right? So let's start from the beginning. Our warm-up settings, right? Remember to set to 64. So that's that. Global game overrides. This wasn't in the default, and this gives you more control. When you are working with animations, you want to set your settings to cinematics. And just for you to remember, let me show you where that is. Um, Viewport scalability. We've been working in Epic for throughout this course. Again, this helps to, if I go to high or even medium, you see that the quality reduces, and that can help you with performance, at least while you are working on your project. So it's taking a while to recompute for medium. So you can see the difference. Not looking so good, but it should be lighter on your scene while you are working. And then when you are ready to animate, you can move back to Epic or Cinematic. So this is Epic. The difference is not much, but it shows up in some specific areas and instances. If I change to Cinematic now, I mean, with my blind eye, I can't really see, with the naked eye, you can't really see much of a difference, but it's there, which is why this is good to have as cinematic. So that's the highest level. Global outputs. So this is where we need to make a lot of changes. You want to change your output directory, so set it to renders again. Output resolution based on that camera we have. I'm going to change this to, first of all, unlock 3000 by 2000. We are not exporting the animation yet, so your frame rate doesn't really matter. Override existing outputs. This means if you render the same camera again, it's going to override the one you previously had. So you might want that on or off. What else do we need to adjust here? Yes, so playback starts, playback end, 0 and 1. So it's just only going to render one frame. And that's basically it for this. We're using deferred rendering, nothing to adjust here. Now this is JPEG. If you want to export PNG, you can right click, output type, can bring in PNG and disconnect JPEG. And then render layer, this basically collects all of this information, passes it through here, and we get our output. So I'm going to save this. So we're using the render graph, not the default one. We know we saved a new one, so we need to load that one. So we're using our own render graph now, and going to render local. So one thing I just noticed. So this is the new one. We have, I noticed this yesterday, and when it comes to the image sequencer, when we're making the animation, there's a way to get the alpha back, like to see what is, to make this look like glass. But for a still image, I'm wondering why this happens. I'm sure it's something that has to do with the fact that we are using PNG, but I don't see why it should be giving us that issue. I haven't done much research into why that is happening. There might be a setting here that will fix that. So maybe I'll look into that for the last class. So in that case, for now, we'll just use JPEG. But I'll use PNG for the sequence for the video exports, and then I'll show you how to fix that. Again, I'll look into it before our last session next week. So, oops, I put PNG again. Let me do JPEG, output type, JPEG, save, and let's export again. Okay, so this is the, okay, let me group by type. Yeah, so that's the PNG. This is the JPEG. Another thing I'm noticing is, I don't know if it is because we're using the blurred image for the background, it's almost not visible, even though in the camera, okay, actually it's the way it is, so that's fine. I thought maybe it wasn't capturing something, so it's just because of the way it is. For this shot, you might, let me see. Okay, so I also did not, I thought I locked the camera. Apparently I did not. Um, transform is locked, so why is it moving? Strange things are happening. Let's see. Right click, unlock. Okay, let me lock it again and see. Okay, that was super weird. Don't know what happened there, but that shouldn't have happened. So yeah, the fear was that something was wrong, but it's capturing what it's seeing, so that's fine. That's fine. So yeah, that is the render graph and then the basic when it comes to exporting an image. Now, when it comes to exporting animation or an image sequence, which is what we'll be using, let us look at that. Okay, so it's not looking crisp and sharp because for this, before you came in, Christian, we've worked on a lot of settings, right? So I'm just showing you how to export. If you want it to be crispier, then for example, for this shot now, the aperture at 2.8, I will increase it to something like 22 so that everything is much sharper. I don't know if you can see it in this viewport or from the screen. So at 2.8, some things are in focus, out of focus. So that's why it was a bit blurry, but the more you increase the aperture, the sharper the image will be. So I wasn't focusing on getting it to look good. I was just focused on showing you how to export since we've covered those settings previously. But yeah, hope you can see that it looks sharper. But that being said, there's actually something that we can do to even make it better. So thanks for bringing that up. Let me show you now. This is PNG. I'm going to delete that. Are these two the same? Hold on. I think they're the same. I'm just going to delete one of them and then we'll compare. Okay, good. Let's go back to the render graph, and I believe it is going to be in global settings. Let me see. Console variables. I want to add a console variable, but I'm trying to see where I should put it. Hmm, JPEG. Let me see. Global output. Global overrides. Okay, we can put it here. So if you remember in one of the previous classes, let me go to screen percentage. Unreal Engine will give you a screen percentage based on your system specs, what it feels to be good for you to work properly, right? Typically, it should be set to 100, right? We can push this further to even 200. Obviously, it will not be good for real-time interaction or when you're moving around, but it can help your renders and animations. But we won't do that here because it will not work here. What you want to do is use it in the movie render queue. You see that we have a place for console variables, right? So I'm going to click on this to add a console variable. I'm going to type r.screen percentage is the first one, screen percentage. I'm going to set this to 200. So it's going to be double of what we have. So it will be much sharper. Save. Well, I don't need to save this. I'm just going to render again. First of all, let me rename this to 1. I'm going to render. Going to take much longer because it's like much more work for you to do. So Christian, I hope I've answered your question. So you can see that it really, maybe I should have done 150, but it really makes it, takes a while to do, but should be better when we are done. And this even gives us the opportunity to see the warm-up. You can see that it's not looking so good, but as this number starts to increase, it starts to like settle down and get brighter and look, much proper. So I will let this finish. One other reason why I don't, well, I won't say I don't use it. When using this now, I might need to, it might shake up Unreal Engine a bit, so you might need to like restart it for it to come back to its senses. Let me put it that way. But let's see what happens when we are done. All right, good, good. Okay. Yep. So taking quite a while. You get better results at the expense of time. So if you have all the time in the world, perfect. If not, at 100, it's perfectly fine. Again, the reason why it was blurry was because we did not adjust the focal length. So tempted to cancel this, but let it run its course. The render itself should not take that long as well. We're almost done. So after this now, we're going to look into creating a sequence and how to export an image sequence. We'll then take that into, I'm going to use DaVinci Resolve because that's what I use, but you can use Premiere Pro or any other video editor. So we'll take that image sequence and convert that to a video export, and that should be all for today's session. Okay, so you can see it's now looking much better than what it was at the beginning. Warm up is done, calculating the render now, just one frame, and it's finished. Okay, I'm going to name this 2. Let's now compare and see. Wonder if you can see it in this. Oh no. Okay, so what happened was, let's go back to Unreal. Yeah, so before it was locked and I made a lot of movements, so it wasn't, for some reason it keeps on unlocking. This is a new behavior. I don't know if this happens after a render. I'm not too sure. But right now you can see Unreal Engine is very slow, very buggy. I definitely need to close and restart because I won't be able to do anything meaningful. So that's another reason why I typically don't increase to that much. Even 125 or 150 will give you a significant boost. But going back to the render, we can't compare to the previous one now because it's not exactly the same thing. But there's a big difference. There's a big difference. To be much sharper. So hope that helps. Yeah, I definitely need to close. In fact, this is another good thing to show you. I've not talked about this video memory stuff here because previously it was 150 or 400, right? It's not a warning per se, or it doesn't, at that point it's not affecting your scene. It's just telling you that of the 400 megabytes allocated for this project, you're at 150. So it's just telling you where you are. This right now, because of what I've done, it has gone beyond 400. This is at 1,100 and something. Depending on your graphics card, how powerful it is, you can actually increase that number. Right now, I can't remember off the top of my head. I'll mark that down for our last class because that's where we'll work on our blueprints. But you can extend that number to 800 or even 1000 MB. So that will take 1 gig out of your graphics card. So if you have a graphics card of 8 gig, that's fine. Mine is 16, so I can even go, way above that. So that's why right now the system is really misbehaving. So I'm just going to close, save everything, and reopen it. I believe is this one. So once I open it, if that error is there, then I should say something like 150 out of 400. At least that's what I've been getting most of the time. So we'll see. Almost done. Sometimes it's even best for me to just restart the system, but obviously I'm live, so I can't do that. But just closing and opening should be fine. Okay, where was I? Levels, apartments. All right, good. We're back. So if that error pops up again, we'll look at the numbers and see what it says, and we'll address it in the last session next week. Let's go back to the sequencer. Now we've made previous 5 other sequences, right? Previously, what I said was, when making your animations, it depends on how you might have an idea of what you want to do. You might not. For this project, I was just making different sequences or different camera shots based on what I felt looked good. And then I got the image, the audio later. So let me also do that. Again, the audio I use for this project is in the description. If you want to use the exact one, I'm going to make a new folder called audio. I'm just going to drag it in. Remember where I saved it? Audio. Okay, good. So drag and drop, save. Let's go back to our sequencer. So what I do sometimes before I, you know, export or go to DaVinci Resolve or whatever, I create a master level sequence. So click on level, it's the same level sequence. I just name it 00 underscore master so that it's always, should always be on top, but something is wrong today. So I'm going to open this and I'm going to drag in all the other sequences to start to arrange or tell the story I want to tell. Now, obviously, we only have 5, so I'm not going to really bother with that. I'm just going to bring them in order. As you can see, as I brought in one, it's shooting way beyond 150. So because this is going to be the master level sequence, I'm going to increase the timeline to something that will contain all of them. So for now, maybe something like 1000 and something. I'll also extend the extent of the clip, bring in the second one. Now, I want this to snap to the end. It's not snapping, even though snap is enabled. I just need to click on these 3 icons. Enable snap key to elements, snap sections to elements, and now it snaps. Bring in the third one, snap, fourth, snap, and the last. We'll just work with this just to show you some things. Also, I can bring in the audio. Can I drag and drop? Yes. And that brings in the audio. So the way the animation works is I let the animation start with every tick. I look for areas in the audio that had a distinct sound, and that was where I cut the animation or the sequence. So if I play it now, so that was a tick. So that's one there, another one, another one. So you get the idea. Tune from day to night, and that's another one. So again, it keeps you expecting that something will happen as the sound is changing. So that's one way I've found myself making my animations, right? It depends. You can just have a very nice ambient sound that doesn't really have any kind of cuts, and you just change the sequence as you see fit. So there's really no right and wrong with this, just the way I just end up working on animations like this. So maybe I should try and change it up once in a while. But yes, for this one, I did that. So it was good to just try and arrange that in Unreal Engine, have an idea of what I want, right, before exporting it out. So let me just quickly do that for this 5. It's a bit loud, so I'm going to reduce the volume to 0.3. Now, the beginning did not really have a place for me to have as a starting point. So I decided to use somewhere in the middle and then or somewhere after and then track back. So you see what I mean? Also, I need to enable the camera to see what's going on. Yeah, so that point is the first, is where I want the clip to change first of all. So I'm going to move this back, drag this here. Now this is where I want the next clip to happen. So as you can see, my sequences are just enough for those cuts. If this was extending more, I would need to go back to this second one, make it longer so that it would fit into where the audio is. So again, these things are not fixed in stone. You might make a sequence that is 5 seconds and realize that, oh, this needs to be less or more. So you go back, make adjustments, come back. So this fits in perfectly. So I move this here. I bring this forward. Now this is a very short one. I want this to stop here. Now, two things. If you are really pressed for time, you can go back to this, reduce the number of frames. This is not O3 was how many? So two things. Even while I'm inside this master sequence, I can double click on that and that will open O3 in front. So this is 150 frames. I can bring this down to like 120. But if I go back, or I can just, collapse it, maybe do some at the end, some at the beginning. So you're cropping left and right. So that, you won't just crop one end completely. That will skew the animation itself because you've done, it's better to cut off from the top and from on the bottom so that you have more of the center. Okay, so adjust like so. It's always better to have more clips than you need. And then move this here. Now this is the wrong clip obviously for this shot, but I'll do 2 ticks for this one. So this is where it changes. I will move this here. Now if you notice something in this other one, where that tick was in the middle, it almost syncs with when the depth of field changes. So I can actually go back to the animation and move that depth of field so that it kind of syncs with that tick there. So these are just things that you can do to just make your animation a little bit more engaging and more deliberate, essentially. Yes, so I remember that for the last one, we did not actually create a camera. So I'm going to do that now. Sequencer UE5. Yeah, so I'm going to add a camera. First of all, let me go to where I want the camera to be. Typically, something like this. Add the camera. It's at the bottom here, so I can bring it up to the top. Expand. Focal length 20. 18. So this can be a starting point. And while it's going all the way, let me expand this. So now we're actually done with the, if this is how long it takes for the chessboard and everything to come up, I'm going to move this to the very end and then extend. I want everything to fill up 150 frames. So camera starts here, and by the time it gets to the end, I want the camera to be here so that we can see what's going on at the coffee table. So click transform. Now again, on both ends, you want to ensure your rotations are good. So roll and pitch should be set to 0 so that your image is straight. So I'll come back to the beginning and ensure, okay, they're both on 0. So that's perfect. Now once I play, I have something like this. And then you see the chess pieces coming up. I mean, from this distance, it's kind of far, but that can be its own shot where the chessboards are popping up. Save all. Let's go back to the master. And now this should look better. Okay. So again, as many as you have, I will populate everything. And once you've gone to the last one, ensure that you bring this back. Or is that still? Let me just put it here and use this to end it. Whatever you export now won't go beyond this, even though the audio goes beyond. So there's one way to export this. There are 2 ways to export this. You can, if you're 100% sure you're happy with what you have created here inside Unreal Engine, you can just export the entire thing like this as an image sequence. So let's do that. Click on the render this to movie. We are going to go to render movie render graph. going to switch to the still, going to open it, save as, I'm making a copy, render graph anim, anim for animation. So that is what we want to edit now. Okay, so we need that as well. So yeah, let's make some adjustments. So I'm going to change JPEG to PNG, right click, output type, PNG sequence. Deferred render is what we want. JPEG sequence is fine. Global output settings, we want to reset the custom the start and end range so that it animates the entire timeline. So turn this off. Now we are going to use standard 1920 by 1080 because of the aspect ratio that we are using. Going to change this from render to make a sequence folder. Save that as the output. We have our output, we have our resolution. Yes, very important. Frame rate. We are using 30 frames per second, so you want to be consistent. Well, what this means actually is, even though we've worked in 30 frames per second, right? Let's say you suddenly realize, oh, you want it to be in 60 frames per second. It's very simple. You just change it to 60 frames per second. Watch this, from 720, this jumps to double. So you don't have to do extra work. You just export this as 60 frames per second. Okay, so I'm going to go back to 30 frames. Ensure this is set to 30 frames as well. Override existing output. I typically leave this on so I to override what I previously exported in case I made a mistake, so that way you don't have multiple exports in one folder and you're confused as to what is what. And I think every other thing is fine. Game overrides fine. Warm up 64 perfect. So I will save this. Changes from the still to the anim and render local. This shouldn't take time. So you're going to render all the frames from 0 to 741. Again, like I said, you can ignore this warning. Let me go back to, so it's pretty fast, to be honest. Again, I have a good graphics card, so that definitely helps. Perfect. And we are done. We have our sequence. So we have them all here. Now, before I take this to my video editor, I have a nice software I use called DJV. It's a sequence viewer. You can find a link to the description where you can download it. Let me see. Yeah, this is it. DJV. It's in the link. It's in the description. It's free. Download and didn't I just open it? Let me see. Okay, I opened it opened twice. So what I would, once it's open, I will simply just drag in any frame at all of this entire sequence, and I can scrub and play it. The most important thing here is to ensure you're in the right frame rate, so 30 frames per second, and I can just play. That way I can have a good look at it, see if there are any issues or errors before I take it to my video editor. So let it just run. All looking good. I think there's an issue here. Everything looks to be out of, nothing is in focus, so maybe something happened. We'll look at this again. But let's continue, which is why I enabled override, so that if I make any changes and re-export, it just re-exports that issue. Now again, we did not use the accumulated depth of field. That would have made this way better. In fact, I think I'll just enable it and see if it's going to take longer to export. It will, but I don't know how much longer to take, so we'll enable that as well and see what happens. Okay, well, it goes back and forth. So nice preview tool to have. So let's go back to the one with the kitchenette so this is where previews are actually useful. That's 3. Let's select the camera and let's see what's going on. Okay, so maybe I shifted something by mistake. Nothing seems to be in focus at the point at this moment. So I will click on this, select the hub. Let me do it manually. Okay, let me select the hub again. Okay. So yeah, this looks better. So this is in focus and this is much blurrier. All right, cool. Save. Let's also go back to the chessboard and select the camera, add the accumulated accumulation DOF, and then we'll export again and see what happens. Movie render queue. Now, I've shown you one way to export, right? Which is exporting the master sequence. We have two potential issues. We made adjustments to 3, the third sequence, and the fourth, right? Luckily for us, they are together. If we want to export this again, we need to get the actual number. So this is 340 to, let's just say 590. So 340 to 590. If I want to export this again, I need to come into the graph, go to the output settings, enable custom playback, and type in 340 by 590, right? Now, it works in this situation, but what if it was 2 and 4 that had issues, right? You would have to, first of all, export 2 and export 4, and it can become, quite cumbersome, especially when you have a lot of sequences and you want to export several. So typically, I don't, unless I'm 100% sure, I don't export the master sequence. I rather export the individual sequences and compile them in DaVinci Resolve or any video editor. So that's what I'm going to show you now. So instead of exporting the master sequence, I'll delete this. Instead, I'm going to select 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, drag all of them into the movie render queue, change it. So while they're still selected, or if I deselect by mistake, select all, change it from basic to render graph, change the render graph, and you load your animation. Okay, let's just ensure that everything is still the way we want. I would just put this in a different folder. So sequencer 2 or sequence 2. Again, I could have as well made a copy of this so you can have multiple graphs for different things, right? I'm just using the same graph. So select, save, everything is the way I want it to be. And now I'm simply going to just render. So I'm going to render each one by one into that folder. So with the accumulation depth of field, it is taking much longer to export. You can see that the remaining time for this, let it go a few frames, and that'll give us a good idea of how long this will take. Let it get up to like frame 10 or so. Okay, so I'm not going to wait 19 minutes or 18 minutes for this, but you can already see the improvement to how the depth of field looks. So you can see how much time it really takes. For something like this, not too bad to be honest, but if you are doing like a 4K render, it's best to just set it to when you want to sleep, and so in the morning it's done, or when you're less busy. So I'm going to cancel this one. Yeah, so this will take about 17 minutes thereabouts for a 6-second clip. So, do the maths. And again, this will take longer or shorter depending on how complex what you're trying to capture is. So that's also something to take note of. So I'm just going to disable this because of time. So escape to take a few seconds to cancel. Let's go back to that, and I'm just going to remove it. Okay, save. Now I've already rendered the first one, right? So I'm going to uncheck and render the rest. Okay, so you can see how much faster it is at the expense of some quality. So pick and choose. Okay, the rest will be pretty fast. Yeah, it's much better. Good. With this, no, a 4K won't take up to 8 hours. So you know what? Let's just test. Let's test with that is if you are using the depth of field, it can that 18 minutes can jump up to I'll multiply that by 4, so that can jump up to an hour for that clip. So, but for a typical render, right? So the first frame, let's see what a 4K export will do. So I'm going to change this to times 2. Yeah, so this is 4K right now. I'm going to save and just render out the first one. So it's going to override that other one, which I don't want. So I'm going to export this to a separate folder again. So go back to the anim, output settings. So sequence 3 or sequence 4K, save, and just going to render the first one alone, see how long it takes. So this is a 6-second clip. And let's see how long it takes. It's doing the warm-up. It's obviously slower because it's 4K. It shouldn't be that long. Again, this is a reference because this is based on my own, PC specs, but yeah, taking longer, but not significantly, right? So you can still get out very good 4K animations pretty fast. I wish I had marked how long. The other ones were almost real time. So that's 6-second clip. Let's say it took 12 seconds to export the normal one. This 4K now is taking about so far 43 seconds, maybe like a minute. So I think a good rule of thumb I would say is maybe 3 to 4 times. So yeah, it is almost a minute for that 4K animation, as against 10 to 12 seconds for normal HD, and somewhere in between will be faster still. If you're doing maybe like um there's HD, there's not 2K, but there's something before 4K, so that can be a nice middle ground. All right, let's see what we have. So this is the first one that I had everything exported at once. This is sequence 2. I'm going to open the DJV, drag it in, the very first one, press play. Unlike the other one where you can play everything at once, this one will only respond to the sequence name. So I can only play one sequence at a time, right? So again, it's not really an issue. Drag in the second one and then play to see what it looks like. Good. So once that is done, let's move on to the last step, which is compiling this into a video. Again, I'm using DaVinci Resolve because it is equally as good as Premiere Pro in my opinion. I've used both. It's free. There's a paid version, but the free version has almost everything I need. I don't see myself ever rendering an 8K video, for example, which is only available in the Pro version, and some other minor, more advanced things, which again I've never needed to use. What else? It's if you don't use not if you don't use it and you want to use it, the link is in my description. You can download it. It's free. Like I said, this is the website. You just scroll down and download the free one. And even the pro version is very affordable. It's one-time payment as against Adobe products, which I personally taking my time to, remove from my workflow. There are a lot of nice products that are equally as good, if not better, in my opinion, that give you good quality. So before this turns into Adobe versus the rest of the world. Another reason why I don't use Adobe, or another reason why Adobe I think still has a strong hold on a lot of creators is because the ecosystem is very large. Lots of tutorials, lots of presets, so it has that going for it. But again, I am someone that I'm not so deep into video editing. I just use it to compile my videos. So DaVinci Resolve is just perfect for what I need. I have to spend how much every month to do that. So moving on, free advert for DaVinci. You're welcome. Let me open it and we would begin compiling our video. I think for now I'll also close Unreal Engine. I think we are done with that. Perfect. When you open it up for the first time, this is what you see. Christian, let me know. Have you used DaVinci Resolve before? Let me know. Or what program do you use for your video editing? You would have by default you only have your local base. This is where your projects will be by default. If I right click and open file location, this will be somewhere in your C drive. It's it just saves the project itself, but everything you're using in the project, like your audio, your image sequence, will still live wherever they are on your system. So it doesn't really affect that. So let's work with that. I'm going to create a new project. I'm going to call this test. Click on create. The first thing I want to do, this is not really going to be a DaVinci Resolve tutorial. I'm just going to show you the steps. I'm not going to cover what is not, important. The first thing I do before I start anything is I go to my settings and ensure my timeline frame rate is set to the timeline in Unreal Engine, which is 30. This is very, very important. If you don't do this, because by default it always starts at 24, Premiere Pro, okay, all right, not bad. It's the same, process. Just different tool sets, but same ideology. So set this to the same frame rate you exported from Unreal Engine, because like I said, if you don't do this and you start working, you can't edit this later. You need to delete everything you've done. So it has caught me up a few times. This is one of the only gripes I have with DaVinci Resolve. I remember, I think in Premiere Pro you can still edit the timeline, even though you still need to edit some other things. But once you are locked in, once you start, you can't, go back. So I've gotten it ingrained in my head. The moment I open my project, I go straight to settings and change the frame rate here. So we are using 1920 by 1080, which is fine. This can be changed at any time. So the only one you need to be very careful of is your frame rate. Every other thing I'll leave at default for now. Click on save. I want to import the sequences into DaVinci. I'm going to go to the media tab and I'm going to go to documents and go to apartments, then sequence 2. Now, if you are using DaVinci Resolve for the first time, the sequencers or sequences won't come in like this. If I click on this icon here, frame display mode by default will maybe be set to individual or auto, and you will just see all the sequences. You see them lined up like this. So if you want to see them properly, change this to sequence. So it arranges it for you based on the naming convention. So I'll select all of them, select one, shift and select the rest, and drag it into your media pool. So once you've done that, let me go back to audio, drag that in as well. Now I'm going to move to the edit tab, which is where all the cooking is done. So I'll drag in clip 1. It creates a video clip for you, and at the bottom you have your audio clip. Drag in clip 2. So essentially what we just did in Unreal Engine, we are going to do it again in DaVinci Resolve. Little more time, but I prefer this in the sense that if I need to adjust a clip, I just simply need to export that clip alone and not try to export a section, or because if you want to change multiple things in multiple clips, that can be very cumbersome if you're only exporting one master sequence. Okay, so drag in the audio again, because I'm not sure, it doesn't really have a start that I can really sync to. I'll just move forward. Okay, this might be a bit loud, so I'm just going to reduce the volume a bit. Okay, so that point is where I want the first change to be. I'm going to expand the audio. I'm going to move all this forward. Let's see. I also want to crop the audio as well. So this is a good start. Okay, before we even continue, let's address something. You say that we have this alpha issue we had when we were rendering. So again, like I said, for the renders, I will figure out how to fix that. But if you're using DaVinci Resolve, and I'm sure it can be fixed in Premiere Pro as well, what you want to do is select the sequences, right click, go to change alpha mode to ignore, and now that way everything looks proper. So I'll try and figure this out for the renders for next week if you are rendering with PNG, because I wasn't sure how to get rid of that. Let's continue. Also, you will see that you can also get some cues from the audio file itself. You kind of see where the hits are coming from, so that's a good way to know where to change the clips. So this clip will be changed here. Drag this down. So that's the next change. Now, I did not go back to adjust to sync the change of the depth of fields with the audio, but okay, let me check something. Good. This is very small, but let's see. Because I have a little bit more of animation that is not going to show, let me see if I can make that change and if I still have enough space. So let's go back. So I want this to happen, so it's meant to go the other way. So let me cut from the back ever so slightly, move this backwards a bit. Perfect. So you see how it syncs, and because I had more animation in front, hopefully that would be enough to get me to the end. So that's why a lot of times I don't mind extending my animations to be beyond what I think I need, because you don't know what you might need to adjust as you go along. Again, it's especially if you have the time, more if you're extending more, more time, more everything. So if you have the time, it's a good practice to have. I'd rather have extra frames than not enough frames. Perfect. So there was still enough for that. And the last one. Okay, so we are good basically. This particular audio runs about 1 minute long. If you want to see if you want to expand the timeline, I don't think I even showed you in Unreal Engine, but if you want to expand the timeline to I will hold down Alt and scroll and it extends. In Unreal Engine, you hold down Control and you can do this exact same thing. So it extends for like a minute or so, and I just made sure the animation was within 1 minute. Sometimes you might get an audio file that is very nice, but it's either is maybe too long for what you need. So obviously you just drag this down. Let me scale it back up, and at the end you want to fade out the noise. So I'll right click at the end, add a fade of 30 frames. Um, Even for the video, you might want to fade in and fade out. So I will fade out at the end, 30 frames, fade in at the end, at the beginning, 30 frames, but there'll be an issue. You see that we have this PNG thing again, which is the default way DaVinci Resolve works. I don't know about Premiere Pro. So what I want to do is I want to add a black layer below this, or a black color below this. So I'm going to move this up to a second video layer. I'm going to go to Effects, Generators, add a solid color. So I'm just going to extend this all the way. It doesn't have to be that big. And now it fades in from black. Sweet. And that is basically how I set up my sequences in DaVinci Resolve. The last thing to do now is to export, and that will be done with the very last tab, that's the Deliver tab. There are a lot of presets which can be used, but typically I just like to have full control over my export. So let's give it a name. I'm going to use test as well. Location, save it on my desktop. We're exporting the video as a single clip, not in individual clips. Want to ensure that audio is also enabled. Going back to video. Format should always, well, not always, but MP4 gives you good results. Codec should always be H.264. Encoder can be left at auto. To be honest, this should be enabled. I can't remember why. So let's continue. Timeline resolution will be what you set up in the project settings. If you want something less, then obviously you can go to custom and adjust it. Your frame rate is fixed, you can change it. Encoding profile, can use main. Presets, let's just go for quality best. If you want something specific, like when I'm exporting for, let's say I want to post this on my, let's say, WhatsApp status. I know that WhatsApp doesn't like your video should be about 500. The bitrate should be about 5,000 rather. Anything more than that, it will seriously compress the video and it might end up looking worse. So for something like when you want to post on different platforms, try and look for what the formats, the bitrate should be and adjust it here accordingly. Otherwise, if it's just a video that you want to play or send to someone, you might as well use the best quality. Now, this estimated file size, for whatever reason, I never trust it because it's always never as much as this. So I'm going to add to the render queue and render all. So it's going to be quite fast. Let's go back to desktop, test. Can you imagine? It's even more than that. Interesting. This is the very first time that it is proving me wrong. So that was a a good estimate. Obviously, we're using the higher settings, so we'll do on that test with something lower and see the difference. So let's run this. Cool, not bad. So let us change a few things. I'll get rid of this. Change this to balanced. Quality is fine. High is fine. Oh, you know what? Actually, The rule of thumb is, if let me even change it back to quality, right? We are using 30 frames per second, right? You will simply just change your bit rate to 30 frames per second. Because right now I think they're exporting at 80, which is overkill. So if you are using 60 FPS, export with 60 FPS bit rate. So let me use 30 and let's export. How to render queue. Okay, let's rename it. So test 2 and render. I think that was even faster. So this is 48 MB. It's let me open them side by side. So this is the second one. This is the first one. Okay. Well, because they're quite small, you might not even see the difference per se, but from what I can see, there's almost no difference. So that will be the way I would do it. And I believe with that, we are good to go. If there's anything I have missed out for whatever reason, we'll cover that in the last class next week, Saturday. Also going to try and figure out, like I said, how to ensure that when you're exporting your images or your renders with PNG, that they look, those issues where you have glass don't look weird. And then yeah, next week we'll tidy up everything, where we would now work on blueprints, how to put on the TV on and off, how to open the door, how to switch from day to night and put on the moonlight as well. And yes, I knew I was forgetting something, the TV itself. Okay, so it's good that I remembered. You know what? Let's move it to next week. I've closed on Real Engine. It's not something that we can cover in like 2 minutes. So, and I think it actually makes more sense because we are working with blueprints, and there are some things you have to think about um when you have a project where you are working on animation and you are working on blueprint. There's some things that you need to take into consideration. So you know what? We'll cover all of that in our last session next week. So please, as usual, if you liked this video, please like, subscribe, share the video with people that you feel would benefit from this. And yeah, it really helps the channel, helps me to grow. I would, even after this series, try to still keep on posting content, maybe work on a separate project. If you have things that you want to learn, please drop in the comment section. I would, look at them and try and see what I can do as well. So with that, we are done with today's class, and I'll see you guys next week. Peace.